Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, you've heard a lot about the wage gap, women earning less than men. We're going to get into that subject, but first, our all-star business panel weighs in on what else? The Pennsylvania primary on April 26th. We'll get to that after these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, there's a lot to talk about as we get closer and closer to the April 26th primary. The candidates, presidential candidates, are all over this state. U.S. Senate candidates, Attorney General candidates. There are more candidates than we can possibly get into in the next half hour. Joining me, as often is the case, is our all-star business panel. Fred Anton, he's the CEO of the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association, and Gene Barr, he's the CEO of the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. All right, both of you have covered enough campaigns. I won't get into how long. Fred, Villanova, what was that all about?
Well, that's terrific. It's been a long time since 1985.
National champions.
So I'm very proud as a graduate and a regular attender of basketball games to have enjoyed this.
Now, do I have to bring St. Joe's? You're the St. Joe's guy here?
I'm a Big Five guy, too. I'm a Philly guy. So I think what Villanova did and Jay Wright's coaching job was tremendous. I want to point out St. Joe's did make the tournament as well.
There you go.
Didn't quite get as far, but it really was a great opportunity and a great recognition for Pennsylvania and Philadelphia basketball.
I'll tell you, your alums are ubiquitous. You can't go anywhere in this state, and so are F&M alums. I want to point that out. All right, let's go. All right, I'll start with you, Gene. It looks like the Democratic side, President Hillary Clinton, this is sort of a Clinton state, given the history and the background in here. Sanders could narrow it a bit, but would you be surprised if she wins? I wouldn't be particularly
I wouldn't be surprised. What I think Sanders is truly coming on, and there's some real interesting dynamics here. One of the numbers I've seen, which I know you've seen, is that when you look at this whole outsider perspective, I think the number is something like 15% of Bernie Sanders supporters would vote for Donald Trump if Bernie is not the. I mean, there's some very interesting stuff going on in this country right now.
That's right. So, bottom line here, Fred, would you agree this is, it would be a stunning defeat for Hillary Clinton should she lose this state, given her history?
No, I don't think she'll lose. I think she'll win overwhelmingly. But I think the Republican primary will learn a lot more from the Republican primary. Yeah. I'm terribly afraid, with the history we have in Pennsylvania since 1988 of the Democratic presidential candidate carrying Pennsylvania by 5 to 10%, that this is going to have an effect down
ballot. So U.S. Senate, members of Congress, legislature.
And I think we can look for insights into this, what might happen in the general election when we see the primary and how much Trump gets and how much Cruz gets and whether Kasich runs strong.
Yeah, now, Trump has led it. I've not seen a single poll, including those we've done at Franklin and Marshall, that has Trump behind.
Right.
I mean, we'll see. Look, he's got double digits in New York. That's be on Tuesday. He's obviously, the big deal is whether he gets to 50% and wins the lion's share of the 95 delegates. Trump, would you see the possibility of a Kasich or a Cruz upset here?
I mean, at this point, it looks like Trump's going to have it where we're, down, obviously, pretty close to the primary right now to where the actual election is. But it doesn't look, when you look at all the numbers, it doesn't look like Trump is going to have the numbers he needs going into Cleveland. Yeah. So we're going to have some really interesting discussions this summer about what's going to happen. Again, look, he's got significant support. And the establishment, the long term, he was not the choice of Pennsylvania's Republican leaders. So this is going to be very interesting as we proceed from here.
You think Trump, go ahead.
What I think to look for in this primary is the vote that Kasich gets. I think many Kasich voters in the primary will vote a Democratic or not vote for either Trump or Cruz. I think that Trump and Cruz are just too far to the right for a number of the liberal Republican voters, and the number of what you would think were the Republicans in the Southeast and
down
the
in the
Eastern
Philadelphia suburbs and up in the Lehigh Valley, the moderate Republicans.
They're voting more and more in presidential elections for the Democratic candidate. And I think if either Cruz or Trump is a candidate, it will even be a wider margin for the Democrats.
Go ahead,
There's
Gene.
some interesting. I'm not quite sure I'd characterize Donald Trump as a conservative. And this
I
gets into
couldn't
a
agree
lot
more.
of it.
He's
whether you want to use the term populist. I mean,
like that
how do you
term.
make a pronouncement on abortion and have both sides attack you, which is what he's had over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, he's not
I
a
would not call him a conservative.
Yeah.
I mean, he tries to say the right things, but I don't believe that he is, and I think that's going to be borne out.
All right, we're going to run to a break. When we come back, we're going to take up, if you have another comment or two, but I want to get into the Democratic U.S. Senate race, which is huge given the importance of the Senate. Republicans have to hold on to 5 seats. Conversely, Democrats need to win 5. This is one of the top U.S. Senate races in the country, with Pat Toomey defending his Senate seat. We'll be back with that and more after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, now celebrating 100 years as the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
All right, Fred Anton, Gene Barr, our all-star business panel joins me. We're doing an assessment of the upcoming April 26th primary, the candidates and some of the issues. All right, Fred, Trump, is he likely to win the state? I'm going to put you on the spot.
He is, and I agree with the dissatisfaction of the Trump voters. I feel it myself. I blame the Republican leaders and Governor Corbett for not getting anything done when they had control.
He got a third. Trump has a solid third. He doesn't lose. I mean, no matter what he says,
yes,
Gene.
I think he probably does. And as Fred said, I think we've got to figure out and address this dissatisfaction that's so evident in this country. And as we've said earlier, it's the Sanders people, it's the Trump people. And I think in many ways they're closer
they are.
than the opposite ends of the spectrum.
They're both using the anti-establishment word. All right, while you're up here, U.S. Senate. It's a really tough primary. 3 Democrats vying, very different personalities, come from different areas of government, and their backgrounds are very different. John Fetterman, Joe Sestak, Katie McGinty. Take it. It could be close.
I think it's going to be close. Obviously, McGinty has picked up most of the Democrat traditional supporters, and those dollars have flowed there. But look, Sestak is a tough campaigner. To be honest, no one knows exactly where this is. We could be heading for a rematch of the Senate race from 6 years ago.
Sestak and Toomey.
And this is going to be a very interesting election night number. I'm not quite sure where Fetterman. He probably takes more votes away from Sestak because they're both the outside, the traditional, but I think it's going to be close.
Sestak, former admiral, worked in national security in the administration of a Democratic president. I think you know who that is.
7th Congressional District.
Yep. Congressman Katie McGinty, DEP secretary here, worked for Clinton and Gore, worked for Tom Wolfe. Then you got John Fetterman, the mayor of Braddock. Interesting personality. Fred.
Terry, I cannot believe the Democratic establishment, including President Obama and the Democratic National Committee, endorsing Katie McGinty and putting a lot of money into her campaign. I can't understand. Is Sestak that bad? And if Sestak does win, doesn't that give some fuel to the Toomey forces that the Democrats didn't want Sestak? So why should the voters in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, Fred raises a great point. Sestak twice has not gotten the endorsement of the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee.
Correct.
Go ahead.
And a lot of it, goes back to when he decided to take on Arlen Specter.
That's exactly
the
right.
Folks didn't want him doing that, and he tends to rub people the wrong way, or at least that's what people say.
Up until a couple of weeks ago, about 3 now, maybe close to 4, there were 46, 50% of the Democratic electorate hadn't made a decision. Now they're on air. Now they're on television.
They are.
So it's still possible, right? This could go Sestak, McGinty, is that
I'm
close?
more inclined to think Sestak.
Sestak.
I am too. Of course, there could be a huge flood of money in for McGinty towards the end. Depends on what they can do. As we said, she's got all of the interest to a large degree behind her. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, if you ever wanted to talk about an establishment candidate, I think it would be her. All right, we're going to a break. When we come back, we're going to get into maybe the Attorney General's race. We've got to talk a little bit about Governor Wolf and what's going on in the legislature, some fascinating things, developments in the past week. We'll be back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania, and by the Pennsylvania Coal Alliance, representing companies involved in America's most affordable, reliable energy source. To learn more, visit betterwithcoal.com.
Welcome back, Gene Barr and Fred Anton, our all-star panel. All right, Fred, let's take a look at this. The bipartisan bill telling Governor Wolf how to spend the education money. Bipartisan, they passed the medical marijuana bill. Is bipartisanship breaking out in the legislature? And what does that mean for Governor Wolf?
Well, common sense is breaking out into the legislature. Terry, the administration of government by the government's office during the last year has been chaotic. You don't want school districts with information about what they do when they have to close the schools down.
That's not good for the state?
No, that's not good for the state. That's not the type of government we want. We want a flow of funds for necessary activities that are funded by the state. We haven't had it from Governor Wolf. It's a very serious problem.
You're shaking your head.
I don't know if political bipartisanship. I think election reality is breaking out. Think about it this way.
That's good.
We don't see a broad-based tax passing this year in an election year. These guys and gals don't want to be going into October, as Fred points out, with schools poised to close, with them going to the polls a month after.
Yeah.
So, and we were very close to that during this past budget problem. So I think that I'm not saying it's going to be done on time. I'm sure we'll be back here talking about you asking us again, is it going to be on time or not?
Particularly
I don't know whether,
you mean
particularly
in June?
However, they really want to get this done because they cannot go into the November election with schools poised to close. They know that. They're not going to do, I think, any kind of broad-based tax increase, highly unlikely. So it's more of an election reality than this big outbreak of bipartisanship, although certainly you see some of that from...
And we need leadership here, and we need leadership on one major issue. It's pension reform, something, the pension problem dollar-wise compared to another billion or two for education or another 100 or 2...
Go finish your thought.
Yes, the bright priority here has not been addressed by government, and Governor Wolf ought to consider the pension plan a major problem.
Yeah. We've only got about a minute or so we'll skip the Attorney General's race. We'll get to that another day, many days, because April 26th. But let's look. Do you think the Democrats and Republicans have a sense that they have to work? I mean, the majority leader, Dave Reed from Indiana County, said there's bipartisanship. You follow this closely. Are they still far apart on the total spending and on taxes?
I think that they've gotten a bit closer, as you've noted. And Fred's absolutely right. If you don't fix pensions, this is going to sound strong, but almost everything else is irrelevant. It's a $58 billion fiscal problem. It's the biggest fiscal problem facing this Commonwealth. And I think there's growing realization they have got to do it. But again, I don't see a broad-based tax increase, and I think both a lot of Republicans and a lot of Democrats are going, hey, you know what? Let's get this fixed and buttoned up.
Gene Barr gets the final word, as always. Thanks for coming in. We'll see you next month, and we'll take up maybe the election results and maybe the budget. All right, coming up, you hear it all the time. It's the wage gap. It's big in the presidential election. It's discussed virtually everywhere. We're going to talk to an expert on, is there one, and what's causing it?
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, advancing quality, improving lives. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Business Council and by the Pennsylvania Business Council Education Foundation.
Well, welcome back to the program. I want to reiterate April 26th, primary election day. We have a closed primary in Pennsylvania. Democrats can only vote for Democratic candidates, Republicans for Republican candidates. If you're third party, probably nothing on the ballot, maybe a race here and there. If you're an independent, you probably cannot vote in the Democratic and Republican primaries. I just wanted to point that out. All right, joining me is Terry Mashack-Behney. She is with Conrad, Siegel Investment Advisors. Did I get that out right?
You did,
yeah,
absolutely.
It's not easy. All right. Throughout the course of the presidential campaign in particular, but you hear it in these other elections, there's a lot of talk about the wage gap, the differential between what men and what women earn. Let's go, first of all, to the facts, and then we'll get to some of the reasons. So what are the facts? Is there a wage gap?
Unfortunately, there is. According to the 2014 census, which came out late 2015, on average, the average woman earns about 73 cents for every dollar the average man does for the same level of education. Here in Pennsylvania, it's about 71 cents. And looking locally at some of the counties, Dauphin County had the narrowest gap at 75 cents, but Lancaster, the largest, at 63 cents.
Okay, now, has that been closing over the years? I mean, it seems to me when I read, I mean, the fact that you're mentioning that there is one does not surprise me. Is it, how do I put this? Has the gap been narrowing or widening, would you say?
We think over time it's been narrowing a little bit, but that's still a huge difference. And you know, your first question is, does it exist? Unfortunately, my 9-year-old even knows it exists because the U.S. soccer team, if you saw, right, the U.S. women's soccer team is filing complaints with the association because the men's soccer league earning more, but yet the women have better record and greater viewership.
Oh, I would think. I mean, maybe that's why I follow golf, men's golf, they make more. Maybe it has to do with the fact that there are a lot more viewers and ads, you know what I mean, television. Well, is this partly because, I mean, I'm a believer in multiple causation. There's rarely one thing.
Absolutely.
Could this be a combination that men rule and are at the top of companies and make these decisions? Is it possible that it has to do, the education might be the same, but women drop out of the workforce to have children and then they lose that experience time? What?
Yeah, like you said,
give me a couple of them.
There's a couple of reasons. One, there's more women in lower paid industries, perhaps retail.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yep. Studies do show that if you have two graduating from college, right, the wage gap is much narrower, but then as time goes on, that increases.
Yeah.
And you had said that, women drop out of the workforce for a period of time, whether they're taking care of, senior parents,
whatever,
children, and men continue to get raises throughout that time frame, but women do not.
Yeah.
Perhaps another thing is men, I think, are, on average, a little bit more assertive when it comes to negotiating starting salaries and raises throughout time.
Okay. All right. So, but there are some things that women ought to be thinking about, having to do with investments and how they look ahead and sort of planning for this. Give us a couple of the big ones.
Absolutely. Biggest one, I think, is start saving as early as possible. That compounding effect really kicks in. So even if you can start out with just 1% of savings of your salary, you need to do that. You need to increase that as time goes on. Great time might be, annual company raises, bonuses, if you can, save more. Get involved. Studies show that a lot of women want someone else really to do it for them, whereas the man says, I'll do it myself.
Right.
So they tend not to be involved. And if they're alone, perhaps, right, not in a relationship, they might not be doing anything. So need to get educated and check your asset allocation. Studies show that women can be more conservative than men because they're afraid of losing money. But yet if you're too conservative, right, with inflation, your money won't even keep up.
But I love your point about starting early. I mean, not to personalize it, but when I started, I was a professor at Millersville, and we could put money into a 403B account. That's, where you can tax deferred.
Yep.
I put $10 a pay in.
It's amazing how it adds up over time.
Well, I could increase it as my salary went up over years. But you're right. I mean, people don't. It's easy just to put that off.
Yep.
And even if it's $5 or $10 a week, if you're doing it for 35 or 40 years, I mean, it ends up making a big difference. You also point something out that eventually I won't say 100%, but 90-95% of the time, women will actually be in charge of the family finances.
They will.
What's that about?
Well, they live longer.
That's true.
Right.
Although that's decreasing from 7 to 5 years. Go ahead.
Divorce rates. Perhaps taking care of parents. They might be on their own and need to help them with their finances.
Yeah, and how over time, as women stay in the workforce, as they get into upper management positions, I mean, it looks to me like this eventually will get rectified, but there's still the problem that many women into the workforce, out of the workforce, end up taking maybe service industries jobs where they get paid less. But it looks like this is a time issue as well as the other things that you accurately point out, right?
Time. It's interesting. Vanguard did a study that came out in late 2015 looking at an aggregate men's account balances and women's account balances, and the men's were 50% higher. And they attributed it not because of better investment returns, but because of the wage gap and the women earning less.
Yeah. Well, we're going to continue to, I think it's going to be a big issue. It's a big issue in the presidential campaign and other campaigns, and hopefully this will get rectified. There are more women than men. More women are now, I think, in the workforce. Now, maybe not in the total workforce, but it's growing all the time. But I want to thank you for coming in. If you get some change in this, you got to come back and help us out.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. We'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And as always, stay well.